Okay, if you can give me your name, your date of birth, and where you were born.
Okay, my name is Jose Angel Flores. I was born in Weslaco, Texas, on April 1st, 1953. My family is basically Mexican American, having roots in the United States and in Mexico. My mother was born in Weslaco, Texas.
That's spelled Weslaco?
Weslaco, yeah.
Weslaco.
Weslaco, Texas. My father was born in Chicago, Illinois. My grandparents were born in, I believe, Victoria, Tamaulipas, and we identified one of my grandmothers as having been born in Lerdo, Durango, Mexico. Not sure about my grandfather, one of my grandfathers, but we do know that that my grandfather on my father's side came to the United States to work on the railroad in Laredo and in San Antonio, Texas. Back in the 1900s. It'd be 1921, I believe.
And what was his name?
His name was Adolfo C. Flores. And my grandmother was Mercedes, I believe Mercedes Rodriguez Flores. Right. And then on my other side, my grandfather Ernesto Garcia, and my grandmother, I believe Ernestina Flores. I'm sorry, not Flores, Garcia. Oh no, it was Rita Flores, I believe. I'm sorry, Rita Garcia. I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Memory.
No, that's all right. And then your parents' name, you didn't.
And then my parents, Rosa Garcia Flores, and then my father, Concepcion Moreno Flores.
Siblings?
Siblings, I have Mercedes, was the oldest. She's now Flores Stasi. Then Juanita or Janie Flores Trevino. She was married to Trevino. And then my older brother Concepcion Flores. Then my younger brother Daniel Flores, and younger sister Elisa. Maria Elisa Flores.
In general,
I'm sorry, Taylor. Also.
In general, what did they do? What type of work did they do?
In general, they well, my older sister ran a restaurant. Actually, both older sisters ran restaurants here in Grand Rapids. Janie now is deceased, but she owned her own restaurant, El Azteca restaurant. My older brother worked in construction. Then my younger brother was a police officer. He's now retired. And then my younger sister worked in dentistry. She's a dental hygienist. So, but we came here as migrant farm workers back in, I believe it was 1954 or 55. Originally stopped off in Saginaw, Michigan. Then my father learned of another.
So what did you stopped out there? What type of work did he do there?
Well, farm work. He came here to be
sugar beets or something.
No, it came here basically recruited from Texas. They used to pick almonds and cotton and tomatoes and a bunch of crops in Texas, and he would tell us. He and my mom would tell us stories about their days picking crops and whatnot in Texas, and show us pictures of them actually picking cotton and
in Texas.
In Texas, in West Texas, they are the Rio Grande Valley and area. They worked with crews and went around that whole circuit, and then learned of.
But they were born in Texas, right? They were not.
My mom was born in Texas. My father was born in Chicago, Illinois.
And that's why you said Chicago,
right?
Okay.
But my father and my grandmother on his side left Chicago probably for a number of reasons. My grandmother.
How was he born in Chicago?
Yeah, my as I say, my grandfather came over working on the railroads about 1921 or so, and then he apparently learned of opportunities in Chicago. Started working for Carnegie Steel in the foundry. Was by himself, I guess. Then brought up my grandmother, and they had God, I want to say like 7 or 8 kids prior that had been. They were born, but then they perished early in infancy. 2 of my uncles were born in Chicago. 2 of my uncles were born in Chicago. One was born in Texas.
I don't know what part of Chicago. Is it near the steel mills? Or?
Actually, they lived on Brandon Street.
Brandon, okay.
Yeah, and you know, in researching it, I think one of them died at the age of 22 months or so, and then the other one at 8 months, and then the one that was born in Texas, as far as we know so far, he was a year and a half or so when he died. But you know, so she had lost a lot of her children, and I don't know, maybe, you know, that certainly impacts a parent, and maybe they had some issues, and she picked up and left, went back to Mexico, and left my grandfather in Chicago. So he later died in, I think, 1948 or so, and we have all of his records, but she went back to Mexico, taking my father.
This is Durango, isn't it?
Yeah, actually, she didn't go back to Lerdo, Durango, where she was born. She wound up going to Guanajuato, and in Guanajuato, she raised my father as a single parent, I guess, and then later moved to Monterrey, Mexico, and she set up a little restaurant that she had, a little restaurant store. Very, very small. I remember visiting it when we were able to go to Mexico. I think it was in the 1957 or so, 58, right around there, 59, memory.
Was it a big restaurant? Or?
It was a little tiny little thing, you know, just a little thing. But it was impressive. It made an impression on me because she gave us little bags of money, you know. She had a bag of money for each one of us. And I thought that was pretty cool, because then we went to the store down the road and bought whatever we wanted, and you know, it made an impression on me that she was an entrepreneur, that she you know, made her own way, and she was quite strict, I guess, with my father. And so when my father turned 16, he decided to cross the border. Told us a lot of stories about his travels. And
what kind of stories did you remember?
Well, yeah, you know, my father was he was a worker bee. You know, he had to get up early in the morning in Mexico and go out and make a living at 8, 9 years old. You know, and so he was on the street selling from starting with chiclets to food, to newspapers, to helping people at the train station, carrying bags and whatnot, to going down to the farmers market there in Monterrey, and buying things from one location and then going and selling them on the street. And he was quite a salesman. You know, I remember him, you know, in the stories he told us, and my mom, you know, sharing those stories too, because I grew up when, you know, we barely had a television. Remember when we didn't have a television and we only had radio, and so I remember sitting around in the living room a lot with parents. A lot of parental communication at that time with children, and I think that certainly made an impression on me. I wish I could.
This is where?
Here in Grand Rapids. I wish we could have recorded all of the stories that they told us, because, you know, my father was one that he knew how to hustle in terms of making a living. He was not just hustling in a negative sense, but hustling meaning that work ethic. You know, he was going to make $1 and in an honest way, and do so, so he could support his family. My mom too, talked about growing up on the farm and doing farm chores, from feeding the chickens and the cows and whatnot. Not that they owned a farm, but they worked on a farm. They were like sharecroppers.
Okay, so they were
they were sharecroppers for a little while in Texas. My grandfather had a lot of kids.
Sharecroppers means that
they got a portion of the
profit of the harvest,
profit of the house, and then they worked the fields and had their garden to support themselves. And I remember visiting my grandfather in Weslaco, Texas, and he had a cow and some goats and some chickens running around, and it's a small kind of a shanty, but still it was he was on his own little property, if you will, and he worked for the farmer. So understanding sharecropping later on, in life and in my studies, he was a sharecropper, just to put the pieces together.
And this was in the 40s, 30s?
For them, it would have been, for us visiting him, it was in the 50s.
In the 50s?
Yeah.
So he was a sharecropper in the 50s?
Yeah, he was a sharecropper still in the 50s. And so, as I was saying, my father did teach us a lot of survival skills. I remember him saying, you never really have to work for anybody. You can't just sit around and wait for somebody to offer you a job or whatever. You have to create your job. And so I remember him showing me how to make a trellis for roses, a rose trellis, that the roses grow up, right? And he said, now let's take this trellis over here to this old lady's house, a couple neighbors down the street, and set it up for her, and because she needs a trellis, you can see that, on the side of her porch. So we went and showed her, we set it up first and said, madam, we have made you a trellis for your roses, your beautiful roses. They need a trellis to climb on. And it was all painted, just a beautiful thing that we had constructed. He was quite apt with his hands and carpentry and whatnot. And so we made it, and I think sold it to her for $10 or $15. I can't remember the exact amount, but but that went very well. And then when we went to Mexico to visit my grandmother, my father took some money with him, and he bought all kinds of artifacts from Mexico to sell. So he brought little hats and keychains and these big posters of beautiful, they were like murals of beautiful scenery in Mexico. And then he gave them to us, and we'd go through the neighborhood, and we had to present them. So we practiced at home how to sell. And so,
you mean you had to present them, means selling it to each individual?
Yeah, selling it to individuals, because we went door to door, and we were like 8 or 9 years old. And so we practiced at home making these presentations to people, and what we would have to say, and how do we introduce ourselves, and so we'd go and we sold those things like hotcakes. I mean, door to door, people wanted them, and they'd put them up in their homes as kind of a scenery mural, because you put it up and had some glue to glue it in, and set it up for them, and they were beautiful, beautiful waterfalls, beautiful jungle scenery, all kinds of scenery that from around the world. So we did that, and then we set up a little stand outside of the house, right in our neighborhood, and sold all these little trinkets from Mexico. It was, I think, something that stayed with me for a lifetime, and a good lesson. My father was also a mechanic. He was more mechanically inclined, if you will. He worked on his own cars, made us work on cars with him, and we learned all of the series of tools. And I remember fighting back and saying, I don't want to have to do this. When you're a kid, you want to be out playing. We couldn't do that. We had to be, attending him and helping him get the tools. And so you learned very quickly what the tools were in the toolbox, and carpentry tools. And he was a kind of a master of all trades. So the skills that we learned from him really later in life paid off. But I remember resisting and saying, you know, one day I'm not going to have to do this. You know, there's no reason for me to learn this, because I'm never going to use it. You know, I said I'm going to be rich. You know, and when you're a kid, you think, you know, hey, you're gonna do something. You're gonna go to school and not, you know, not have to work like this. You know, and I'll hire a mechanic or whatever. And he would, you know, stress, no, you really need to know this, because, you know, otherwise you're going to be ripped off, you know, and people are just going to take your money, you know, and mechanics are, your car's going to break down, and you're going to need to know this. So luckily I learned, and those are, again, skills in my skill set that I've been able to save on, and then I feel a great sense of accomplishment and connection with him when when I'm able to take my engines apart, put them back together, and do the things that I've done on my vehicles. And he used to sell cars. He used to, you know, flip cars. He would buy them cheap and fix them up, and we would help him. And there again, he was always on this, working for the railroad, by the way. He went to work for the railroad and worked there for many years.
So, okay, he's
the
working
C&O
for the railroad,
here.
That means you're in Chicago.
No, that means we're here in Grand Rapids. When he located here, we worked in the fields, picking crops.
In Saginaw.
No, in Grand Rapids, because we first stopped in Saginaw. Okay. Then we learned of a job in probably just a week or two, and then they moved to Nunica, Michigan. Okay. And in Nunica, we lived in a small little. I remember it was kind of like one of those dug-in basements, you know, that they're dug into the ground, and you just got the windows up, you know, above the ground, and it was just a little small thing. And I remember it being very cold, and my brother, my younger brother Danny, who's the retired police officer now, he caught pneumonia, and when he caught pneumonia, we rushed him to the hospital here in Grand Rapids, and you know, touch and go there. But as they were here, they met a family, and my parents did, and they were able to arrange for staying over here while maintaining. So then they moved back here. God, I want to say that was like maybe 56, 57, you know.
So that's when you came to Grand Rapids.
yeah, we came here probably around 56 or so, 57. And so you were
working the fields here.
Yeah, well, when we were
in the railroad.
And then my dad later after he got himself established here, he worked in the bakery. He worked a number of other jobs, and then was lucky.
Which bakery?
Oh God, I don't even.
Not the one up here.
I don't even remember what bakery it was. It was.
There's one on Kalamazoo. That's not the one.
I don't think it was on Kalamazoo.
There's a lot of Latinos work there.
Right, right. But he did work in one of these bakeries, and I can't remember which one it was at the moment. But but then a few years later, I remember he got an opportunity to get into the railroad, the C&O Railroad, Chesapeake and Ohio. And there he worked for like 13 years as a laborer, you know, basically climbing up the engines and filling them up with sand and with oil or fuel oil. And he did that in all conditions. I mean, just I remember, you know, I don't know how he withstood it for so long, but he did, and being outside and working in the engines or on the engines and whatnot. But then he got an opportunity to take. And
you live where?
We lived right here in this area.
Right in
right on Sheridan Street.
And Sheridan? Okay.
Yeah, right. Two streets over.
Okay.
You know, and so we grew up in this section of town, the Grandville Target area, Grandville Avenue Target area, southwest side of Grand Rapids. Well, he worked that job for many years, and then was given the opportunity to advance. And I remember him coming home. He had failed the test to get this new job, and it required a high school diploma, and he didn't have his high school diploma. He had gone up to third grade in Mexico, and my mom was about the same, you know, second or third grade, and So they weren't really well educated, but they were talented. I mean, they were smart, you know, and they had made their way. And so I remember him, you know, assembling us, and he loved to lecture to us. He was a lecturer.
What kind of lectures?
Well, about life, you know.
Life? Okay.
Yeah, and that's was one of the things that I think you know, kept our family.
So what did he talk about?
Cohesive. So he talked about, you know, the value of education and how he didn't have one, and how this was impacting his future here. He had failed his test, and I remember him emotional at that moment, and he was determined to go back and take that test again. He was given an opportunity to take it again. So he took each one of us, from the youngest to the oldest, and sat us down. He had like a 2-week period to prepare himself. He sat each one of us down, from the youngest learning mathematics and English, enough to, you know, spelling, enough for him to go back and take the test again. And he went back after this. He took the test and he passed it.
So he's learning from
each one of the kids.
He's learning.
From the youngest first to the oldest. Whatever he could glean on English, spelling, you know, basic English, and mathematics, because that's where he needed the assistance. Because he had to prove that he was at least knowledgeable enough to be able to drive, to operate as a conductor, the locomotives. And it's no, you know, easy task. And, you know, you have to read, and you have to be able to read well, and you have to be able to figure out, you know, distance and weight, and, you know, measures for stopping, and, you know, all of the complexity that goes with operating in a, you know, modern locomotive, you know. So he did, and he passed the test, and was promoted to a conductor, or they called hostler, a yard conductor. He you know, transferred the engines from one track to the other, and you know, made sure that they were prepped and ready to go. But he no longer had to work outside as much, you know, and he actually got to drive the trains. And so I remember a positive experience going with him to work, and checking that out. My mom, on the other hand, was she
You would go with him to work.
Oh yeah. We actually got to sit in the little conductor's seat and whatnot, and I guess pretend to operate the train. But it was a very, very good experience, and we were very proud of him. And, you know, he did quite a bit. He also later helped me with my businesses, and dedicated a good portion of his life to helping establish.
So you're growing up on Grandville. How was Grandville in 1956? Grandville Avenue.
In this, you know, it was a very Dutch-centered community here, with very few Latinos or Mexicans.
They told me that it was Dutch. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah, we were one of the first. I say one of the first. We were one of the few families that were here in Grand Rapids. We certainly weren't the first. There were many Hispanic families, but when I say many, basically a handful.
But I mean, now there's a lot of people from Guatemala also.
Oh yeah, now we have.
I mean, at that time.
That time we didn't have Guatemalans. We had a few Puerto Ricans, and we had mostly Mexican Americans that had come from Texas and settled here.
They were from Texas.
Right.
The Mexicans.
Right. The vast majority of them lived in the southwest area. There were a couple in the southeast.
The center was around where?
There was really
the southeast too.
Yeah, we lived a little bit further that way.
Franklin.
Franklin, on the other side of Franklin, on Grant Street.
Okay.
So on Grant and Graham, you had a few of the Hispanic families, and as far as I know, there weren't that many. Okay. However,
but you said southeast too.
Yeah, we had some southeast. There were some Puerto Ricans that lived on the southeast. On Ringlet and and Franklin, right?
Okay.
So Franklin and Division area,
Oh,
right
okay.
around that area.
Were the complexes?
No, they were in homes.
Oh,
They were in homes, and then there were a few Hispanics that owned businesses, like Miguel Navarro had him and his brother Daniel had the 503 bar called Alma Latina.
Alma Latina?
Alma
Okay,
Latina.
that was on Division?
Right on Division.
And any other businesses?
There was Rafael Arriaga and his wife Raquel Arriaga that owned a restaurant.
I've seen that name somewhere. I can't feel it.
Yeah.
Now that you mention it,
Yeah, they owned a restaurant on Madison, and then there was Fernandez owned a Fernandez bar on Madison right next door to.
So it was on Madison before?
Right,
Okay.
right, and growing up, we worked the blueberry fields. We worked the strawberry. First of all, we worked the strawberry fields, the blueberry fields. Then
So you say
picking
we,
blueberries.
the whole
My family, right? And that's where I was going to talk about my mom,
Okay.
who was very influential also in my life, because today we talk about management by objectives and and setting up routines and being to work on time and prepared and time on task and accomplishment of the goals and so forth. And my mom was all of that.
Okay.
She got us up at 4 o'clock in the morning.
Okay.
It was still night.
4 o'clock in the morning.
4 o'clock in the morning. we had to be in the fields at daybreak.
Were you living in Grand Rapids and going?
We were driving out to Nunica.
Commuting.
Yeah.
To Nunica.
Yeah, we were driving out to
And
Nunica.
Nunica's how far?
Nunica's probably about 30 minutes or
30 minutes,
35
okay.
minutes from here.
Okay.
But we're driving off to there.
Is
and,
that towards Grant?
yeah, it's toward Muskegon.
Towards Mesquite. Okay, yeah. that's
Yeah.
right. All right.
And a lot of blueberry farms there, and of course we were out in Sparta and Greenville, and we went as far as
Were there people living in there too?
Oh yeah,
So
there were
some
living
people
camps.
lived there
Oh
and
yeah,
some people commuted.
oh yeah, there were living camps, and then we went out to I believe it was Lakewood, or was it
Lakeview?
Lakeview? Thank you.
Okay.
Went out to Lakeview area picking, and I remember we stayed in a camp. I want to say it was near Edmore. Yeah, and so I,
Because I had lived in Lakeview for a little bit.
Oh,
so
okay, yeah.
Edmore's the next town.
Right. And so, I remember staying in the
So
camp.
there were blueberry fields there?
Oh no, there were blueberry fields, but there were also we didn't pick tomatoes, but we had family that came up from Texas, and they were in the tomato fields there, so we went and visited with them. But no, there were blueberry fields out that way
So
too.
there was like a culture of some people living here, some people coming from Texas?
Yeah, oh yeah, there was a constant. Every year we had people coming up from Texas that were extended family, cousins and whatnot. So we found ourselves out there in the field with family or with people from this area, and so my mom would make sure that we got out there. Again, the dew was still on the fruit. We had goals. When we were picking strawberries, it was how many rows we were going to do by 9 o'clock, and how many by 11 o'clock when we would eat. And we had the portable water and whatnot. We had to attend to. For washing our hands.
If you want to stop, we can stop.
No, it's okay. For washing our hands and for basic cleanliness. Didn't have restroom facilities or porta-johns in the fields at that time. Didn't have any rules with respect to child labor. No, you went behind a tree or whatever you could go. Okay. Found a bush for cover. So there's some lack of things that needed to be dealt with, and I think.
Because you're working for a farmer and he has no insurance, none of that.
Yeah, none of that. You worked and whatever.
And how did
the
they
family
locate
made.
him? How did they locate the farmer, or the farmer located you?
Well, that's a good question. I think it was my mom connecting with other families, in the area, and they knew, and so the word of mouth. And so we also worked in Hudsonville in the celery, weeding celery.
So Hudsonville had a lot of farms.
Oh yeah, Hudsonville, Jenison, right outside of Grand Rapids. So that was a very short commute, and yet we were able to work. And I remember at that point being something like 12 years old and working. That was one of my last jobs in the field, really, because by the time I turned 12 years old, I went to work for Fiesta Restaurant.
So 12 years old, what year is this about?
Oh, I want to say about 68, something like that. 60 or.
So you were working in the fields
or
in the
maybe
60s?
67, yeah.
In the 60s? You
Yeah,
were working in the
yeah.
fields?
We spent my childhood working in the fields every summer, while other people were off, vacation, and we were, vacation in the fields, right?
Yeah.
We wear out those blue jeans. You could tell, they were all worn out at the knees from strawberry picking, and then we were always,
Back when the strawberries grow from
yeah.
the ground.
And we'd always walk around with blue hands, because of the blueberries, and then of course we thinned peaches and then later picked apples in the fall. But it was always during the summer.
Thin peaches. What is that?
Yeah, we thin peaches. You prune them. You prune peaches so that
I don't know.
Yeah, so that there aren't so many growing, and that then allows the fruit to get bigger. So we did some pruning. I remember doing that, and then actually picking apples in the late August, early September, if I recall.
This is a group of people doing this.
Oh yeah, you know what? My brother-in-law, my ex-brother-in-law, he actually would go around in the neighborhood with this great big flatbed truck with the rails on the side, and we would get on top. We would load up into that truck and we'd drive out to the fields every day. This is when we were on our own, because.
So this is how you hung out during the day, and
this is like during
the neighborhood kids.
Right, neighborhood kids, neighborhood adults.
They all went and
they'd all load up. They'd drive right through the community and load up early in the morning and go out there. I remember doing that basically when my mom had broken her
Are you telling me
leg.
that Grandville Avenue was like a recruiting station?
That's right.
For the farmers.
That's right. It looked like California in some respects, like a day labor thing. You jump on the back of a truck and go out and work. But yeah, that was very, very common. A lot of Mexican and Mexican Americans who were working in the fields, and so that was the way they made a living. And I remember that summertime is big for that, and it continues to be in our neighborhood here. If you're here at around 6 in the morning or 7, 8, there are vans parked in my grocery store right today, picking up people and transporting them out to the fields. So that continues to be, kind of an activity here.
Because that was early, because that's
right.
Yeah,
right.
That was 4 and 5 in the morning.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right. And in our case, again, my mom, with management by objectives, she knew how much we were going to make by the end of the week, but certainly by the end of the day. Had it broken down by hours, how many, either crates or logs we were going to fill, buckets of blueberries or cherries, whatever, because we worked on all of those endeavors. And she had it planned out, what we were going to do to supplement our income and to buy our clothes for the upcoming school year and whatnot. All the money
was done as a family.
Done as a family unit.
So
yes, from the youngest to oldest, and there was no babysitters left at home.
Right.
Everybody went out to the fields.
Okay.
And so I always said, if you're old enough to walk, you're old enough to pick. And I remember my little sister, was out there, eating more berries than not. But then later on, she, had to work later, But
so you guys, you're with the brothers and sisters, so you're also playing out there too. Right?
Oh yeah, that's how you spent your day. The little kids were out there. Someone, trying to take care of them while they're picking. Mom, yelling out commands, come on kids, and encouragement, you know, ándale mijos, you know, nomás tenemos una hora, you know, y tengo unos tacos, you know, so she would, you know, come on kids, we've only got an hour left, you know, we got to make 3 more buckets or whatever, 3 more crates, and then we've got some nice hot tacos, you know, that we're gonna give you. And of course she packed all of the tortillas and the beans and you know, tacos ready for lunch. And I remember her getting up early in the morning to do that. So it was like, you know, she was constant work.
So in a way it was work, but it was still fun because of you're with the family, or no?
Well, I mean, there were some times you got a chance to play. You know, you throw a dirt, a pack of dirt, you know, at people. You know, I mean, you could throw berries at people, you know, and have some fun, or scare somebody, you know, when you come around the tree and they're busy working. But
when you came, like on weekends or anything when you were not working,
we worked
work every day.
We worked every day.
Every Saturday and Sunday.
Well, yes, and some of the farmers demanded that we work on Sunday.
What do you mean demanded?
Demanded that we work on Sunday.
That sounds like a strong word.
Oh yeah. If we didn't work every day, and we were fired, or I remember out in Hudsonville we had a situation with a farmer that refused to pay us at one point. You know, my dad had to go over there and basically make him pay. You know? Yeah. So.
He had enforced.
They had an altercation. Yes, sir. He was serious. Yeah, and he was a big guy. And he had a lot of big guys with him. But my dad made him pay. So yeah,
City Hall.
I will remember that also. You know, sometimes it was.
So was there? In the neighborhood, was there any clashes with some of the Dutch or some of the other people?
Well, you know, we have always lived in a segregated society in Grand Rapids, the segregated communities. And I remember our school, going to Maplewood Elementary and at Franklin Elementary, they were heavily black schools. And so, you know, some of the altercations there were with the Mexicans and blacks trying to get along. But then.
And why do you think that was?
Well,
they're both minorities.
You're both minorities, you know. So you had to learn how to adapt to the black culture there, and being the smaller of the minority group. Well, you know, we had a hard time, and so we were, you know, in fights and having to, you know, defend the family unit, if you will, as our culture was not understood and we were different, but it was something that we were able to adapt to, I think, over time, and made a lot of friends and whatnot. But of course we had to prove ourselves, you know.
So it was a matter of proving.
Oh yeah, you had to be a fighter. Right. You know, you had to know how to play the dozens and
so you had to prove yourself to the African Americans.
Oh yeah,
to let them know we're not gonna.
That's right. That's right. We talk about your mama just like you talk about my mama, you know, and go, you know, play the dozens, because we didn't have much of a playground.
So it wasn't a racial thing; it was more of proving.
It was more of it was more
maybe
of
a little racial.
Right, maybe the cultural thing,
the
you know.
Cultural thing, yeah.
And you know, they talked about your tacos, or, you know, you throw back about their greens or about their cornbread, you know, and it was like, okay, we can do this, and there were survival skills there. Okay. Then we were.
What about the Anglos?
Well, we didn't have many Anglos in those schools.
Okay.
But then we were transferred over from South. They made a boundary change and integrated Burton Middle School. Then we were bused to Burton, and Burton was pretty much lily white at that time, and so there we had the interracial conflicts with black and browns from this neighborhood that were bused over to Burton.
So they're the
Burton Junior High.
Together.
Yeah. Oh yeah. By then, you know, we were pretty much black and brown on this side, and you know, further on from Hall Street that way it was white and Dutch. And then Burton Heights was all white, you know.
Yeah, I don't want to minimize the classes. I mean, there were classes.
Oh yeah, there were
black
classes.
and brown.
Oh yeah, we had quite a lot of racism. You know, I mean, you know, we didn't have any federal troops come out, but I tell you what, every day at Burton Junior High, you know, you had this culture clash of white kids with Hispanic and black kids, and you know, you knew you were different.
So this was not a gang
No.
situation. This was a race.
Yeah, it was a
Minority,
racial insensitivity to our
So, you know,
to our
not
groups
like they
and not
said that it was a
accepting.
gang.
Right. No.
No, because they usually say it's a
Right.
gang. but-
Right. And I'll tell you, and immediately once we started moving in numbers and beginning to buy homes south of Hall Street and into the Burton Heights, there was a very, very quick transition. A very quick transition. People moved out and into the suburbs, out into Wyoming.
When you say people moved out, who moved out?
No, the white people.
Okay, so there was the white flight.
Yeah,
that they
the
talked about?
white flight took root very, very quickly once we started moving into that community.
So Burton Heights was the white area.
Oh, yeah.
And you were moving into that area.
Yes. And near side Wyoming, you know, what is now Godfrey Lee, which has totally become Hispanic.
It was just a lot of more people coming in, more minorities.
Yeah, more minorities began to come in, and you know, more Mexican Americans transferred in or migrated here. More Puerto Ricans, more Cuban Americans. There began to become an identified Latino section,
Right.
if you will, and that was this area, Grandville Avenue area. So yeah, we experienced that racial divide. Then from Burton Junior High, I went over to Central High School, and it was at Central High School, and the riots of, I believe the riots of '68 took place at Central High.
Central is where?
Well, it's in the Heritage Hill area.
Heritage Hill, okay.
You know, over on Fountain Street,
Okay.
and that was our.
And you said that's where the rioting?
Yeah, and then 1968 when, you know, you had
Martin Luther King.
and
So the black rioting.
yeah,
Black rioting.
right. There was African Americans basically rioting, and we felt some of that tension at school. There was some altercations that took place and whatnot. Maybe not like some major cities, but it was significant. We knew back then that we certainly were a minority, that many people classified us as, you know, if you're not white, you're not right. You know, you're obviously black, and I've had those kinds of encounters with a lot of people where, you know, hey, they don't care, you black or brown, you're not white, you know,
Right.
you're different. And so they let you know. There's some people who are more overt in their racism than others, but you know, there is definitely a cultural and racial divide in this town, and you know, statistically it shows.
Okay, now, so the neighborhood is it getting together, stable, or organizing, or?
You know what? I don't see it. I see more control by by white influences in our neighborhood.
You're saying today?
Today, yes.
Okay, so
Yeah,
what do
for
you-
some reason, our community just has not been able to get it together at the grassroots level to impact you know, the political powers that need to be impacted here. We have a hard time, I think, building cohesive networks that are committed to change. I think we're so easily co-opted by the white power structure and by their influences that we forget what our charge is. And I say we, meaning the broader community.
Right.
You know, over the years, certainly I graduated from Central High School. I became an activist during that time in high school.
Tell me about those years.
Yeah, it was late
did you get
'60s, early
into-
'70s.
How did you become an actor?
Well, there was a group of people that
Since I've been here, I've known you as an actor.
there was a group of people that were involved in impacting model cities, and during the Johnson administration, trying to build programs for.
Who was this group?
There was a group like Martin Morales, Miguel Navarro, what was her name? Irene Alba, Marshall Chavez, Francisco Vega, and others that were Lou Murillo, or not Lou Murillo, Porfirio Murillo, that were involved in some political action.
And where did they come from?
Well, they were trying to secure some services from the service network that was formed through I think it was Kent Community Action Programs back at that time, where Ray Tardy and Melvin Tardy, who were African Americans, were kind of controlling model cities dollars that came to the city of Grand Rapids, which today would be comparable to like community block grant programs that the city operates, or housing and urban development programs that are available to help citizens improve their standard of living. And people were advocating for better housing for African Americans at that time, and because there was
the housing issues.
There were housing issues back then, and that's when they built these complexes downtown, or not downtown, but on the southeast side and in other
projects, like
the projects, the old projects, correct. And so Hispanics were beginning to impact that, and they established the Latin American Council on Grandville Avenue, and they were organizing this guy named Tomas Martinez. I remember, who was very influential with my involvement in the Chicano movement at that time. There's a guy that came up from Crystal City, Texas, by the name of Gonzalo Moya, and he and Richard Campos, who was a young man who I went to school with, really pulled me in to this Latin American Council, and they had started a Brown Beret group, and they had the Mexican American, they had a Mexican American youth organization called Mayo, and I gravitated toward that. And
this was the Chicano movement.
Oh yeah, so I grew up during the Chicano movement, and became a recruit in the Chicano movement, and that really is what helped me to develop consciousness. And we say developing consciousness meaning of who we are as a people, and beginning to question the history that was being taught to us in the school. And it is through history and through the knowledge of our cultural roots and our historical roots and our active presence in the United States that I became liberated intellectually to understand just who I am in this whole broad scheme of what is the definition of an American, right? And I'm an American, right? With all of the rights and privileges and responsibilities that go with being an American. And I'm very capable of correcting people who have this misconception of what Americans are, okay? And like the Mexicano who says, "Oh, el Americano," speaking of white people as if they're the American. No, we're the Americanos. We're the first Americanos. We're the Americanos that were called Americanos, right? When the English called themselves Englishmen. They called us the Indigenos, right? The indigenous people were called Americans. The Indians, meaning us, Native Americans, right? Because that's who we are. We are the first inhabitants of this hemisphere. And so people don't understand that. The people who don't understand that, they are less in terms of their self-consciousness, their self-esteem, than those that understand it. Because if you know the history of the United States and what role we played as a people in every defense, in every in the settlement, in the naming of all of the places we've named in this country, you then have a sense of empowerment. By knowing your culture and your history, no one can degrade you or somehow make you feel less than them. and I'm not on a superiority kick. I'm on an egalitarian kick. You are no greater than me. You have no power over me, because I am the force that creates myself. From Moyuco Yatsin, which is an Aztec and concept of force that creates itself. You create yourself, just like my dad created his own jobs. Right? He had that internal spirit of self-determination, and that's what comes from knowing your own historical background, the various cultures that contribute to our development as a people. You look at the Olmec, you look at the Maya, you look at the Aztec, you look at the Toltec, right? You look at the Zapoteca, you look at the Yaqui, you look at the Apache, you look at the Puma, you look at the Blackfoot, you look at the Iroquois, you look at the Huron and the Odawa and the Potawatomi. Hey, those are our people, right. The indigenous people of the Americas, the Inca, right? And so a lot of people don't understand that, how we fit in. Right? Or how we participated in the Revolutionary War for Independence, right? The Spanish side of us, right? Or how we participated in the Civil War, right? Again.
What do you mean the Spanish side?
Bernal Galvez, how we defended New Orleans and kept the troops, the British troops, at bay, so that we could experience the victory in Yorktown, right? So. And the Spanish contributions, the Cuban sisters that wound up contributing dollars to fund the revolution, right, in America, the Revolutionary War for Independence. The Spanish sent over emissaries that brought money and brought their technical skills to help George Washington. George Washington actually had in his cart that he paraded in for the parade after the revolution was won. He had Spanish officials there, military officials with him. One of them was so sick he stayed in Washington's headquarters there, because he was ill. But the other one paraded with George Washington and celebrated that great moment. But the Spanish did contribute significant dollars to the campaign, and then, like I said, with Bernal de Galvez, who actually, with military troops and Indians and Mexican Indians, were able to defend the New Orleans port. So that kind of history with David Farragut during the Civil War, and then all of our participation in every war. I have family.
David Farragut, who is he?
David Farragut also involved in the Civil War, right? He was an admiral in the Navy and developed and defended there on the Mississippi.
He was Spanish.
He was a Spanish-born, or Spanish heritage, Hispanic American. Again, we have to claim all of that, the Hispanic side of us and the Indian side of us, and so recognizing, our history of Mexico as an example. We freed the slaves long before the United States freed the slaves, right? We had the first African American, if you will, when you say African American, meaning of the Americas, right? President of Mexico, right? In Vicente Guerrero, and we did that long before Barack Obama.
So Vicente Guerrero, was dark skinned.
He was a former slave.
He was a former slave.
He was a former slave and became a hero, became a military hero, and was elected president of Mexico for a while. So. We've done that. We passed gay rights before the United States, right? Allowed for same-sex marriages before the United States. And not to give all this credit to Mexico or to say, but from my Mexican roots, right? Which are obviously generational roots. Mexico's history does impact me as a Mexican American, and it gives me some enlightenment as to, you know, what my place in the United States is. You know, I've met military heroes, including former Master Sergeant Ray Benavides, may he rest in peace, who also had a profound impact on me as an American. He was the last decorated Vietnam veteran at one time. Now we've obviously recognized some others very recently, but but he had won the Congressional Medal of Honor. You know, I mean, his speeches locally when we brought him here to Grand Rapids, you know, touched me, you know, emotionally, along with a number of others that were touched by his speeches. You know, his acts of heroism on behalf of the United States. You know, I should have gone to Vietnam. I was drafted. I was processed, but luckily they ended the draft. I had number 12. I was supposed to go. They were taking up to 19, and I was somehow spared from that war, because then it ended, and you know, I was done. You know, I was lucky. But I was prepared to serve. You know, I certainly had made that decision, even though I was protesting the war. I did not agree with it. As a Chicano during that time, we were, you know, disproportionately dying on the front line.
So when you say you were protesting, okay, because we're getting back to the
activist role, right? When I was
how you began
involved, right? I began to be involved through that consciousness development, and then began to listen to some of the major speakers during that time. You know, Corky Gonzalez, Rodolfo Corky Gonzalez.
Did he come here?
Yes, he did. Came to Muskegon, actually. Came to Muskegon, and I listened to his speech, and then Jose Angel Gutierrez came also, and I was moved by many of the things he said in his presentations, and then I read about and met Reyes Lopez Tijerina, and then Armando Rendon, who wrote Chicano Manifesto. I met, and also you know, when I went to college, I went to Eastern Michigan University. I brought a lot of speakers through the Chicano Student Association there that we formed.
So you went to Eastern?
I went to Eastern Michigan University, yes.
And where was that?
That was in. I graduated in '71 from Central High School, and decided to go on to college because we had a Chicano recruiter come here, and basically met with
to the school.
Yeah, to the school. Mm-hmm. He was told that really we didn't have any students that were going to go off to college that were, you know, Mexican Americans or Chicanos at that time, and he said, hey, I want to meet with them all anyway, and he told me I could go, and I believed him. You know, I was the first to graduate in my family, and I was the first to go off to college, and I consider myself kind of an exception to the rule, because I probably should have been here just working in the fields or working in a factory and just being a plain Jose Flores. Instead, now I'm Dr. Jose Flores, and doctorate in education, and that came through that perseverance, that sticking to my goals, which, you know, I credit my parents with giving me that experience in life and that motivation and encouragement. But also Carlos Falcon, who was the recruiter, who also played a big role in my life and recruited me, got me financial assistance between grants and loans, and stood by my side in difficult times, you know, when I fell off course, you know, off the path, because at one point in my life I did fall off that path, got caught up with society. Well, when I was in college,
you don't have to answer whatever.
Yeah, when I was in college, I got in trouble. You know, I got into getting high and experimenting with hallucinogenic drugs, like many people back then, the Jimi Hendrixes and the Timothy Learys, and I got off into mental expansion.
For a long time?
Well, for probably about a year or so, and then and then I.
Any other hard drugs or anything?
No, but you know, you get fascinated with certainly with marijuana and LSD and things moving that aren't supposed to move, you know. But I learned a hard lesson there. I got in trouble with the law, and then was able to clean that up later, but it was an experience that I will never forget.
Did you go to jail?
Oh yeah, I did 5 months in a county jail.
Okay.
And then later in life was able to expunge that record and keep it from destroying my career. But it always came back to haunt me, and certainly in reputation and in everything else, and in the stigma. It is like a scarlet letter that you wear forever. You know, people will remind you of that.
Right.
You know, especially if you're a minority, and I don't know how many minorities, don't have records, but I imagine the majority of us don't.
Right.
But certainly when you grow up with a lot of different influences, and it is very easy to fall off track, and I did for a minute.
And this gentleman helped you?
Oh yeah, Carlos Falcone. May he rest in peace. Also, played a major role in my life in college. He was a recruiter, gave me a job as a part-time job while I was a student, as a student recruiter, and we went out and motivated other Chicano Latinos to become college students, and we recruited a lot of kids to college. You know, when I first started at Eastern Michigan University, we might have had 1 or 3% at the most, Hispanics, and most of them didn't know what the Chicano movement was about. We created a Chicano Student Association in a model society there, mini society, if you will, and we elected senators, and I was on the Senate for Eastern Michigan University, and we developed a minority affairs unit there, and actually had a budget, and the Chicano Student Association actually had a budget. And then we wound up electing a Chicana to be president of the Senate. So I mean, it was definitely a learning experience for me. At that time, I became involved with the lettuce boycott and Cesar Chavez, the United Farm Workers Movement. I led the lettuce boycott in Ypsilanti and at Eastern Michigan University.
Okay.
I met.
So Ypsilanti, because that's by Detroit, right?
Right. It's Ann Arbor.
Ann Arbor. That's
right. I met Arturo Rodriguez, who is now president of the United Farm Workers.
Okay.
David Martinez, who was with Cesar Chavez when he passed away. I think he's actually the one who found Cesar at his computer, and he had died. David and Arturo and Sam Baca and several others were students at U of M, right next door to Eastern Michigan University, at the University of Michigan, and they were involved in the Chicano organizations there too, and involved with the farm workers movement. And at that time, I remember David and Arturo talking to me and saying, "Hey, come with us. We're gonna join with Cesar Chavez's movement, the United Farm Workers. All of us are gonna go move down there. Because Cesar Chavez came up, and I had met him at a presentation in Ann Arbor, and he was going to keep things moving. We were demonstrating and whatnot. I decided not to, because I had made promises to graduate from college and come home. So many people refused to come back to their communities to make a difference, and I looked at people that I had studied back then. You had Eldridge Cleaver, you had Rap Brown, you had Stokely Carmichael, you had Huey Newton, you had all of these different people that I read about, and I spent time studying to understand just what this national movement, Angela Davis and all
So,
the
these
others.
are real radical.
Oh yeah, but you know what?
But the kind of movement was radical.
I was somewhat radicalized at that moment, at that time, and people, in fact, suggested that I was a radical or a militant. And they used all the terms. You're a communist, you're this, that, and the other. Especially if you were dealing with challenging the system, as I was, on recruiting Chicanos to the college, on integrating college curricula with ethnic studies, on helping to promote the equal employment opportunity or affirmative action, and hiring more Chicano Latinos in the college as professors and as recruiters and as counselors, integrating our libraries with books written by people like Rodolfo Acuña, who wrote Occupied America, and Rodolfo Anaya, who wrote Bless Me Ultima, and others, so that we as a community could find authors, with our similar experiences, and we needed to make sure that those kinds of things happen, and Chicano community empowerment. If those things are radical and militant, then I'm radical and militant, because I still believe those things. If those things are communist, well, then I'm a communist. But I don't think they are. I think that they're just ideas that whose time finally arrived. And we did all those things. We integrated the libraries with books that were written by Latinos, and we continue to do that in all of our libraries. We increased the number of Chicano Latinos on campus. We empowered them in the student senate. We empowered them in positions of leadership in the college level. The boycott was successful at Eastern Michigan University. However, I was impacted negatively because I was placed on my file, recordings of me, interviews with me were placed in a subversive activity investigatory file that the state police developed on private citizens, which was later found to be unconstitutional and were returned to me. I then just destroyed them. I didn't have any reason to keep them. The state police operated a clandestine operation investigating private individuals for their involvement in subversive activities, which they claimed subversive activities with me was participating in protest movements for Cesar Chavez and the United Farm Workers Movement, in leading boycotts, including the boycott at Eastern Michigan University, in which we attempted to get the university to cease purchasing iceberg lettuce and Gallo products.
So did you have to look for these records, or did they just give them?
They were given to me because of I think it was probably a Michigan Supreme Court decision on it. Someone had challenged it. I don't remember exactly whom, and they had won.
I never heard that in Illinois.
Oh yeah, they had won the challenge.
Here they had the state.
Yeah. And so I was kind of upset when I got the letter, and then further upset when I got the documents, and how intelligent or lack of intelligence that they had in it. I mean, they had me.
They're pretty good. I mean, they're pretty good.
They had me mixed up with another Jose Flores. I mean, and they had kind of grouped all the Floreses, and it was typical lack of intelligence.
So when you said we, you're saying the people that you mentioned earlier. Because you said we were working on this. I don't mean the intelligence thing. I'm talking about the group of people that were around you.
Right.
Who were some of these people?
The group of people that were working back then.
Because you said we did this.
Oh yeah, there was Michael Falcon, who was the nephew of Carlos Falcon on the university campus. There was Anita Regalado, who was elected to Ypsilanti.
Okay.
Anita Regalado, who was elected to the president of the Student Senate, who was also president of the Chicano Student Association, Rogelio Isaiah Rodriguez, Corky Rodriguez, Cal Torres, David Galnares. I remember young people like that, Dan Atkinson. We did a lot of things at the college level that impacted the university forever. I mean, because that group still exists. It's now, I think, called Latino or Hispanic Latino Association or whatever. But they still continue to serve and to create. They've created a scholarship endowment fund with Carlos Falcon El Jefe Scholarship Fund. And the last time I went there, some 10 years ago or so, to an event for them, they were doing very, very well. And so things that I've helped to establish have remained, in place. When I came back to Grand Rapids, I was teaching Chicano Boricua Studies. I was teaching U.S. history.
Where were you teaching?
At Central High School.
At Central High
because I earned my teaching degree in U.S. history with a minor in speech and a minor in Chicano Boricua Studies, which I carried forth with secondary education certificate to return to my alma mater, Central High School, and to teach. And I taught teatro. So I was able to motivate a lot of kids using those classes to graduate. And then I was given government as a class to teach, and that really was the pathway to graduating. A lot of kids stumbled through government and couldn't make it, and that was really an opportunity for me to work with kids in a different way. And many of them Chicanos and Puerto Ricans and Cuban students that had English language difficulties. They're called ELL learners now, English language learners. And we were able to get a lot of them graduated by giving them a different approach to that class, which I remember when I passed it, it was a lot of memorization and, a lot of regurgitation and, how much of it you remember now, I don't know. But I made it more hands-on, took them to City Hall, applied some things with more street knowledge of the law, gave them activities, built upon their skill sets, and they passed government. That was the key to their success, and they graduated as a result. So there are things that you can do differently. We just have to have the right staffing. And again, always fighting with this district over issues that impacted the community. Education is the key to liberation. Education is liberation, and that's not my quote. That's John F. Kennedy, and then his brother Bobby Kennedy, who influenced me, because I, like Bobby, I'm not one of those people who see things as they are and ask why. I'm one of those people like Bobby who see things that never have been and ask why not. We have to think, as they say, think out of the box. Well, we have to see different vistas, and those people who see vistas that are different than what we have now are people who are nonconformist, people who are committed to change, and those people need to be supported because, again, we see things that never have been, and ask why not. And many of those things are good, but many of them mean going against the grain politically, going against forces that co-opt the unintelligent, who co-opt the innocent, who co-opt the people who have no power or no influence, or who co-opt the common worker class in our society, and who want a system that continues to create and to perpetuate an underclass of people in our society, so that the rich may contain them or may retain the existing system that they have, where there is a great degree of exploitation of the working class. Because for people to make millions and billions of dollars while other people barely have enough to survive, there's some inequality in that. When we talk about the 99% of us who are working, who can't make ends meet, we have a structural flaw in our society. That's a reality. It's not enough to just get an education, because an education is not going to be enough. It still continues to be a who you know and who you have influence, personal influence with, in order to be successful here. And it's how much you want to sell out those principles that you have that make you who you are. If it's how much of that you're willing to sell yourself to become successful. You know, we have Hispanics that have made it in town, but look at them in terms of what they've had to sell themselves out for. They haven't been true to their principles. They haven't fought to empower other people, to bring other people up the ranks with them. Oh, maybe they might have brought one or two, you know, because they weren't troublemakers, they weren't outspoken, they weren't going against the grain. You know, they get along, you know, they go along to get along, the phrase, right? They keep their nose down to the grindstone. You know, they never look up to protest when people are being unfair and indignant with them. You know, they're the people who say, well, you know, no, if I raise my voice, then I might be fired, and then what happens to my college fund that I have for my children, and what happens to my mortgage, and what happens to my car payment? You know, I've always said, you know what, I grew up on beans and tortillas. You know, I can go back and work in the fields if I have to, or I can do anything. Like my dad said, I'll create a job, you know, or I'll work on cars, or I'll do whatever. You know, I've been fired for speaking my mind. I have been fired for giving public interviews. I have been fired unfairly, you know, for false accusations, and I have risen above those false accusations. I almost lost my life in my store once because of this falsehood, you know, that was perpetrated by my detractors, and I won't even call them enemies, because they don't deserve to be called enemies. My detractors, who for whatever reason were so motivated to try to keep me from having any kind of influence, you know, because I speak my mind. Because I during my time as a teacher, I worked two shifts, either working as I did in doing entertainment promotions, to developing a bilingual magazine that I developed back in 1981, to funding the Hispanic Center of Western Michigan.
La Voz.
Right, La Voz, the community voice La Voz, which I began in 1981, and then made it a profitable organization that I continue to run after the nonprofit that originally founded it. No longer wanted it, no longer was going to continue it, and I bought it out from the Hispanic Center. I founded the Hispanic Center.
It was part of the Hispanic
Yes,
Center?
it was part of the
And then
Hispanic Center.
you founded the Hispanic Center?
And I founded the Hispanic Center, which then founded the La Voz, and then later wanted to kill La Voz, and I was not going to allow that. So I gave them some money for it, which really was money for nothing, you know, just for what we call goodwill. I founded the Hispanic Festival, Hispanic American Festival.
This is the festival that they have every year.
Right. They had the Mexican Festival,
Okay.
but the Mexican Festival was celebrating Mexican Independence Day.
Right.
I'm sorry, we're Americans.
Right.
You know, I'm a Mexican too,
Right,
Mexican
right.
American, but I'm not a Mexican national.
Right.
That means Mexico is not my country.
Right.
The United States of America is my country, and I'm a proud American.
Okay.
Right? With all of that.
Right.
And with all of that said, I said, we need a festival that celebrates all of our ethnicity and nationalities also. You know, we have Cuban Americans, Puerto Rican Americans, Bolivian Americans, you know, Argentinian Americans. We have them all. Guatemalan Americans. All of us need to be able to also celebrate with Americans, with white Americans. The Dutch, the Irish, the Polish, you know, the Swedes, all of the different groups that we have, the Germans, in our community. And be able to share that in an integrationist fashion, so that they're able to appreciate our culture, and we're able to appreciate theirs, and come out and shake some hands, and you know, and be friends. And so when we started the Hispanic Festival, it was done so with that idea in mind. We had the President of the United States as Undersecretary for...
So you're not tearing the other festival, you were saying...
Right. We just built our own with
the Americans.
Right, with the Americans theme, and we went to the Ford Museum and we celebrated there. You know, and we had that whole park, the Anabawan Park, and that festival meant so much. We approached the President of the United States through his secretary, Undersecretary for Military Defense, sent an official to begin our festival proclamation. We later then had the U.S. Department of Defense bring Master Sergeant Roy Benavides, who made his presentation there. I mean, with full military honors, you know, there, you know, to give this message of, hey, us too, we're Americans and we're proud, you know. And it's not a Democrat or Republican thing. We played both parties, you know. When we started the Hispanic Center, we played both parties against the middle, you know. We flipped a coin. I became the Republican, and Marcos Guerrero, who helped start the Hispanic Center, was the Democrat. And so we had all of these things operative by intention. You know, I played the Republican Party, invited to the White House 3 times. I have a picture with 2 presidents. You know, I mean, you know, they're little small tokens, you know, and I'm not super proud of being a Republican. But at that time, I was a Republican. You know, I'm a Democrat by heart. Always have been a Democrat by heart. But I played the Republican Party because we needed to build the Hispanic Center. And so in order to do that, you have to use every possible avenue to do that. And so we used Republicans and we used Democrats to gain the funding that we needed for that. And we got funding through the Department of Social Services. I then went to to the National Council of La Raza for assistance in writing grants, because no one wanted to help us write grants, and I didn't know how to write grants. You know, it's a kind of a complex, you know, scenario. I'm a great grantsman now, but it took some effort. It took learning how to be a grantsman. It took training to become a grantsman, so that we could write the grants and proposals necessary to get funding through the United Way of Western Michigan, to get funding through the National Council, which we got, to get funding. Now they have funding through the Kellogg Foundation, but back then it was the Department of Social Services. We got funded through the Jobs Training Partnership Act, through the Community Development Grant program through the City of Grand Rapids. I mean, all of these programs came because our ability to write grants. We got those skills from the National Council of La Raza. I advocated for interpreters in the 911 system. I said, you know what, again, we have to see things that never have been and ask why not. Why don't we have translators in 911? If we have so many people who operate only in Spanish or operate only in Swahili, but you know, they're residents, they're paying taxpayers, why don't we have that service? And why is it that when you stop a person, you don't have a translator available, especially when there are so many of us? And why is it that when you go to court, you don't have an interpreter, yet this person is facing very serious charges? So I took those issues on, you know. So why is it in police and fire you don't have any Hispanic officers? You know, why is there a lack of diversity? And why is it in the education system that we don't have full bilingual education, that we now have a very watered down ESL program that barely meets the needs, and we're failing the vast majority of our students? We can't even graduate 68% of our Hispanic students. What's wrong with this picture? You know, again, am I a militant, radical, communist for bringing these things up? No. I believe that we could do this. Why didn't we have interpreters in the hospitals? You know, we had people dying on their deathbed, but yet they couldn't understand what was going on with the medical treatment to be able to sign the release forms for medical treatment. So we advocated with a grant from the National Council of La Raza. We got interpreters for the police department, interpreters for the fire department, interpreters for the hospitals, and guess what? No one wanted to use them because they were given to them, but they weren't ready to accept them. We offered them to the courts, wouldn't accept them until later on, you know. Of course, I did so very publicly and criticized them very publicly, using the media And of course, when you do that, there's some repercussions. You're considered a bad person because you're challenging them on basic issues. But all of those issues have prevailed. I have been on the right side of history with each and every one of those issues. And so now all of those things are in place,
You had a problem one time with the police or something like that. Can you explain?
In 1990,
and
again,
I think you took them to court.
Absolutely. In 1990, they came into my place, into my store, suggesting that someone had sold cocaine or some other substance, because they never proved any of those substances, on my property, with no specificity as to where in the property, or whether I personally had any knowledge, or I personally did any of that, and I didn't. And I was working in the back of my store when I was working on my magazine, by the way. And in the old days, in those days, you had a light table, and you had a big computer that was as big as a desk with a very small screen, and you had to produce these sheets with the type, and then cut that type, put it on the transparent sheets that we had, and glue it on there. So my eyes were kind of fixed on the light, and in the back room the lights were off because you want the light table glowing, right? So you can see the blue lines and line up your type. And these people came in swearing. I could hear them, you motherfucker, get down on the ground, and I had my nephew working up in front while I was working on my magazine. And as they came through the door, they were so tall, 6'8", 6'10", or whatever this officer was, and he was blocking the vision. So it's kind of like when you're, here with the light, you got a silhouette, with fluorescent lights behind. And they've got this balaclava masks on, and in the 90s I had not seen these stealth-looking military operation type police officers. They had military helmets on and all black balaclava masks, little voice boxes, shotgun with a light on it, and they're busting through with all these obscenities, and I'm armed. I live in a dangerous neighborhood. I have high security.
So the neighborhood at that time,
very dangerous.
At that time was kind of downhill.
Very dangerous, very gang-ridden. Police would.
You're talking about what year?
This is 1990.
90. So the neighborhood.
Yeah, the neighborhood. Right. I opened up in '88, and it was very tough in this neighborhood to operate. It was bad. So I carried, legally carried my .38, and
because you had a business.
Had a business. That's right. You're allowed to have a gun on the premises, and so, I grabbed my pistol, and I went to the doorway, between the booth and the back room where I was at. Luckily I wasn't high, right? Because I gave up drugs when I was in college.
Okay.
And I came to the doorway, and there was this guy standing in front of me, again, I could barely see who it was, what it was, because he was dark in the silhouette of the fluorescent lights behind him. And he's saying, he immediately shouted out, he's got a gun, he's got a fucking gun. And then he started, put the fucking gun down, put the gun down, and I'm thinking, well, what's going on, And so I was luckily, I had my gun, I started moving upward with it, to self-defense, but I saw the shotgun, and we grew up as hunters, so, I have shotguns too, I know what they'll do, and they, more likely they got a scatter on them, buckshot or whatever, he's not gonna miss, On the other hand, we're both in motion, and I'm looking in his eyes, he's looking at mine, and it's like 1001, 1002, I said, I'm getting the hell out the way. So I pushed myself out of the way, and when I did that made him freeze. And he started, saying, he's got a gun, put the gun down, put the fucking gun down. And I kept thinking, oh man. And then I must have heard him say police. Right. He must have said it because, something triggered in my mind. Police are robber, police are robber. Well, I'm not gonna live to see,
Right.
So I put the gun down. raise my hands here. I got the desk here, the partition, and he can see my hands.
Right.
And I said, okay, don't shoot. You know, I'm unarmed. Don't shoot. You know, and I had put the gun far enough away from me so that, you know, it was a very quick motion. Again, seconds are ticking. And then they came in and knocked me to the ground. You know, I remember the butt of his or the weapon hitting me to the head here, put me on the ground, and then put me in handcuffs. And they're kind of mad at me, I guess, because I got a gun. You know, and I once I'm in handcuffs and guy's knees on my back, I say to one officer who's standing over me, and it happened to be a black officer, who's now the assistant superintendent of the schools, interestingly enough, and in charge of security.
Oh, is it? Hey, you're on the.
I'm on the ground, yeah, and I'm on the school board now.
Okay.
Right? I'm on the ground, and I say to him, you know, hey, I'm Jose Flores. You know, want to know what's going on? He says, shut up, shithead. And I said, hey, I'm not resisting you, officer. I'm in handcuffs. He said, I said, shut up, shithead. And he kicks me to the head. You know, and I'm like, I'm on the cement already. I said, what's going on? I said, look, officer, I'm not resisting you. I'm Jose Flores. I want to know what's going on here. I own the store. I said, shut up, shithead. And he kicks me again. So I said, look, I'm not resisting you. You know, I'm asking you what is going on. And he stepped on my head, you know, and just kept his foot there. You know, he said, I said, shut up. So I shut up. So I'm sitting there with his foot on my head, you know, and I'm degraded. You know, it was an animalistic act. It was you know, something that was beastly. And then they picked me up. Another officer pretty much pushed me against the wall. My face is, you know, facing the wall there, and he's got his forearm against my back and frisked me again. You know, I'd already been frisked on the ground, but they frisked me again. And then, I don't know if you've ever seen a football player when he's made a mistake, or a basketball player when he's made a mistake, and you know how tall they are, and they get their head down, and the coach is just railing them, you know, you should have done this. Well, I see this image, again, the silhouette of this guy, tall guy that had almost shot me, and his lieutenant, Lieutenant Goethel, is swearing at him. You should have shot the son of a bitch. You should have shot the son of a bitch. And I said, hey, what's going on? You know, I'm pressed against the wall still. I got this guy on my back. And I said, hey, come here, you know. And so he got done with him, and he came over to me. And he said, what do you want? I said, I'm Jose Flores. I'm the owner of the store. I would like to know what's going on here and why you told this guy he should have shot me. You know, he said, yes, he should have shot you. You know, he said, when you attempted to murder a police officer. He said, you attempted to murder a police officer. He had every right to shoot you, right? I said, no, he did not. I said, I haven't done anything wrong here. I said, I want to know why you're here. You know, what it is that I've done. You know, I'm Jose Flores. I own the store. I said, and you guys bust through here. I said, I haven't done anything to deserve this. So why should he have shot me? You know, why would you tell him that? And he said, because you attempted to murder a police officer. I said, you know what, this is ridiculous. I said, you'd better find something in here. I said, whatever you're looking at, I hope you have a search warrant. He said, oh, we have a search warrant. You'll see that later. I said, what a joke. I said, you know what, when you're done, I said, I don't care if I have to go to the President of the United States. I'm going to deal with this situation, and you are going to have to pay for your actions. I said, because they're not right. And that's all. That's all I had to say. These guys went and took me to court, prosecuted me for attempted murder of a police officer, for pointing a weapon at a police officer.
So they came in, they said for drugs, but now it's attempted murder.
They didn't find anything, right?
So now it's attempted murder, and
right.
They dropped the other.
Oh yeah. Well, they didn't have any drug case. I didn't have any drugs.
So did they have a warrant?
They tore up all my place. They had a warrant that somebody had sold something to somebody. You know, right. I don't know how true that warrant was. Yeah. You know, to me it was a joke. Okay. I was criticizing the police chief, who was at that time, you know, having an affair with the Hispanic center director. I criticized him publicly for this war on drugs. We had little kids out there right? And I say we, meaning our community, okay?
Right.
I could witness every day little 12-year-olds out there selling drugs on the street corner
Right.
across from my place,
Right.
and the police were failing to do their jobs. And I was critical of the police department, and I suggested to them that they were operating a policy of containment in our neighborhood, and that policy of containment is a standard policy with them, which allows.
What is that?
It basically says this: instead of having the drug trade go indoors where it's harder for the police to see and follow and track, it's easier for them to contain it in a certain neighborhood and have kind of what a red light district, to where then they can allow that to grow. They know who's involved, and then they sweep up, right, or scoop up a number of people at one time. So they'll do this little net
For publicity
red,
or whatever.
right? Bring in 15 people on drug charges. That's their policy. Well, in the meantime,
And you criticize them for
in the
that.
meantime, young Hispanics and African Americans in this neighborhood are attracted by that. They're attracted by the Rolls Royces that were pulling up, and the Mercedes Benzes that were pulling up, and the guys with all the gold pieces and the rings and the diamonds and whatnot. Yeah, they're attracted by that. They want money, and if you allow that to operate and to fester and to grow, then that is at detriment to a community. Why allow it in my community? Why not allow it over in on the furthest outskirts of Grand Rapids, But no, you'll allow it right here.
And so you were charged with attempted murder,
Yeah, so I was charged with attempted murder anyway,
and
and
then you went to court, and what happened?
right. The other thing I was doing, by the way, was
that-
advocating for integration on the police force
Okay.
and
During that
interpreters in the 911 system at that time. So I was a thorn in the chief's side, and then he was taking it out on my brother, who was a police officer at the time, and forcing my brother, whose second language first language, Spanish, was taken away from him at an early age, like me, in a system that did not want us to be bilingual. They wanted us to be English speaking. So here he is, he's being forced to translate on the job when he can't even translate. And he was being written up for failure to translate. Well, I told my brother, I said, you're not doing these people any justice, Danny. You can't even explain what infraction they have in Spanish, because I can barely do that, And I'm bilingual, but there's a set of language skills to go with that. So eventually he realized that, and he stopped doing translations. So the chief was pissed at him and at me, right, for this situation that was created publicly and was getting some press and some television attention. But anyway, he had plenty of reasons to go after me with, again, detractors that were degrading me and people in powerful positions.
But you took them to court,
Absolutely.
and what happened?
I passed the polygraph exam. I found an attorney who would defend me, and we went to court. And then in court, when during one of the recesses, the police officer said I could have saved us all a lot of trouble. Said, a 37-cent bullet would have done this.
37 cents.
He said a 37-cent bullet would have done this. And I said, yeah. I said, but you were scared, because we were both scared, him against my gun and me against that shotgun, right? And it's 1001, 1002. What decision? I'm lucky to be alive. Had I been shot to death, they would have said I was carrying a knife and a gun, because people wouldn't have believed I just was carrying a gun, right? The knife, they would have believed. Goes with the stereotype. Because all Latinos carry knives, right? But
you won the case.
I won the case. They tried to give me a lesser charge. They kept instructing the jury.
I mean, for a Latino to win a case against the police.
Oh yeah. They kept trying to stack the deck against me. The judge was helping the jury, instructing them to come up with a lesser charge, such as pointing a weapon at a police officer without intent to harm. And that would have still meant that I would have to agree to that if the jury couldn't find me guilty. So while they were deadlocked on a decision as to guilt or innocence, they were coming to me saying, oh, we'll offer you this deal, guarantee you no time. I said, you know what, screw your deal. If you have enough evidence to convict me, okay? I have done nothing wrong. I've passed the polygraph exam. I don't know what else you want from me, right? Hair samples. I don't do drugs. I'm drug-free. I'm kind of a community minister, if you will, in my community, trying to keep people outside of the drugs, right? Keep them away from drugs. But you do whatever you want. I'm not going to plea bargain here with you, all right? I've done absolutely nothing wrong, and this is malicious prosecution, unfair and unjust, and time will prove me right. So I stood my ground, and they came back after 3 days, deadlock jury and whatnot. The judge sent them back in and made them, come up with a decision. So 3 Christians on the group who said, we don't know why they want to convict you so bad, but they do, They said, let's pray and let's go in there with a different strategy. We will agree that he's guilty. And then we will have to identify why he's guilty. What was the motive? What was... So when they did that, they couldn't find me guilty. Why would I do this? I was shocked and confused and defending myself. And when given some sense of possible police, raiding me for something, I opted to put the weapon down, right? And complied. So what did I do wrong?
You were working at Grand Rapids Community College.
No, I was working with Grand Rapids Public Schools as an administrator. I was in charge of bilingual education at the time. Okay. Again, my work ethic has always forced me to work 2 shifts, different types of jobs, right? I've always tried to get ahead, and so trying to put in more hours or be entrepreneurial in my activity, it has always led me to some pursuit to try to do things legally to make money. And so there I was, working my store and being a full-time administrator in charge of bilingual education, refugee ed, Native American ed, migrant ed, to try to build a community presence here that would be something respectful, and to make a difference. So, eventually that passed me, and I sued them and won, got a little bit of compensation, and put that back into my home and into the community here in my store, and have been diligent about my efforts ever since. I have built a business here. At one point I took on the district, the Grand Rapids Public Schools, with a federal complaint because they failed to provide full bilingual education to students. It still continues to be a concern of mine that the school has failed our children miserably, that there is inequality in the system, and that the schools are ridden with nepotism and with cronyism in the hiring practices.
Can you kind of...
Well, the superintendent currently has 2 members of her family that she hired afterwards without education degrees. Currently, without education degrees, and are placed in administrative roles. Teresa Neal. Okay. She was formerly my secretary. But here you have a district that is failing, that has failed to educate or graduate more than 50% of the class since 2008. We place a person in the leadership role without a degree, without an advanced degree at the doctorate level, which we've basically dumbed down all of our qualifications for superintendent, right? But because of ethnic and racial issues confronting the district, we've decided, oh well, one black superintendent replaces another black superintendent. But we have a failing team. We have a failing administrative team, and the proof is in the pudding. In the statistics, they have failed. What do you do with a failing football team? What does University of Michigan or Michigan State do when they can't win a game? Who do they get rid of?
The coach.
The coach and the full administrative team, correct? Right. So this is what we need to do. We need to make sure that we have regime change when districts are failing. However, in our district, the majority of students are minority. Hispanics are the highest minority, then African Americans, and then there's just a small amount of white students. So it really isn't that important for them to educate our kids, right? Because they're mostly minority. Who cares? They're going to be the subservient class in our society. They'll continue to be less functional than the majority class, and so we'll have workers, and that's what we want. The rich need workers in their hotels. They need workers at their event venues. They need workers in their factories. They're not so interested in keeping or making our children successful, right? Although we espouse and we promote that we want all children to succeed and to be fully capable and competent and contributing to our society, you know, there's a myth there. There's a fallacy in the district, in the system.
Okay. Any final thoughts that you want to add? Things that we didn't mention?
I'm retired. I ran for the school board. I was elected. I continue to be very politically active and will continue to be politically active. There are many people who agree with me, and there's some who disagree. And I think in a society of discourse, you know, as long as we can peaceably agree or disagree with one another, you know, that's democracy. And so
you continue to be politically active. So in some of the future ideas that you're thinking, like maybe the newspaper, the business.
Well, with the magazine, I continue to advocate for equality, for diversity in our police and fire forces, diversity in our school system, a greater commitment to educating all of our students, especially our ELL students, to give them a fair footing in society, and I plan to be very active with my magazine, which is the largest full-color bilingual publication circulated in the state of Michigan, which is not bent on fraud like some of our competing groups are. You know, I know that being number one, as we are, in our publication does come with some criticism, and that there are always people looking to bring us down, but we'll stay up as long as we can and stay vigilant and committed to our philosophy. And our philosophy is one of forward thinking, of bringing equality to the neighborhoods, of shifting the focus from downtown development and tourist attraction, Grand Rapids, paid for by the taxpayers, you know, you and I, who live in the city of Grand Rapids. You know, I could care less about the whitewater rapids being restored so that kayakers from all over the country can come here. That's not going to make my neighborhood any more vibrant. What makes my neighborhood vibrant is the development of businesses and safe community, a safe community through policing and education, and of building a middle class from the poor, from the ground up, of empowering young people to become professionals and establishing themselves in our community. That's what I consider empowerment. When there is a teacher in every family, a police officer in every family, a firefighter in families, social worker or a university professor or a physicist, you know.
We get your children. Do you have children?
Yes.
What are their names?
Primavera Flores, Adelita Flores, and Citlani Flores.
Any final?
No, I just want to believe that, or continue to believe that there is, you know, a positive force active in America, and that hopefully equality and justice prevails every day.
Thank you very much
for
this thing. Thank you.